If there's one series in the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise, not counting Capsule Monsters, which I'm not even going to bother talking about here, that is, generally speaking, disliked more than GX by a majority of the fans, it's probably ZeXal. Pronounced Zeal in the Japanese version, and I have no idea why they changed the pronunciation. Zeal sounds so much cooler. On paper, it should have worked. On paper, this should have been one of the better Yu-Gi-Oh series. It tried to combine a lot of things that Yu-Gi-Oh does really well. It had an interesting setup for the plot that wasn't too complicated. A bunch of mysterious cards have started appearing. They're Xyz monsters, a type of monster recently introduced to the game, I guess. But these are special. They're all numbers. They are various monsters with a number somewhere on their body and a number in the name, and they have a special power, in the anime at least, where only other numbers can defeat them in battle. And they seem to do odd things to people who find them, and in fact seem to take forms appropriate to the people who find them and then kind of corrupt their mind, so there's this big mystery around what they are and where they came from. Meanwhile, our protagonist, a kid called Yuma, also finds a number, but it doesn't corrupt him. Instead, he gets a spirit companion, sort of akin to the other Yugi from the original series. But his spirit companion, Astral, looks kind of like a silvery alien. And we eventually find out that Astral is tied to the numbers and that Yuma may have some destiny that he needs to fulfill, but we don't really know what it is because, just like the other Yugi from the original series, Astral can't remember who he is or where he came from. The world was much more vibrant and alive than the world from 5Ds, and the show didn't take itself nearly as seriously. The protagonist this time around was the youngest in franchise history, if I'm not mistaken, and was more the age and the maturity level that Yugi, the little Yugi from the original series, sometimes seemed to be between his stature and his interests. But unlike the little Yugi from the original series, Yuma didn't have that almost natural emotional maturity that he could draw upon in serious situations, and he wasn't a great gamer. So he had plenty of room to grow and evolve as a character. He had a group of friends that were pretty diverse and interesting. There was a main girl character who was a lot like Taya from the original series. She didn't duel, but she was still kind of an emotional center for the group and did contribute to stuff. At the end of the day, it was almost like the original series reimagined in a futuristic setting, with details shifted around just enough that it made things interesting again. For example, Astral didn't take over duels for Yuma, but he could communicate with Yuma and give him advice, and it was up to Yuma whether or not he took that advice. And one of the best things about the series, hands down, was the real and genuine friendship that developed between Yuma and Astral as the series progressed. They started out barely being able to tolerate each other, and by the end, they had as strong a bond of camaraderie as any two Yu-Gi-Oh characters before them. But this series did have some major problems. First of all, in both versions, Yuma's kind of annoying. By making him younger and making him less emotionally mature, yes, they gave him room to grow as a character, but they also made him a little kid, and they wrote him like a little kid. And little kids are annoying. He got better fast. By the end, he was a little badass. But I know people in my real life who are Yu-Gi-Oh fans who couldn't make it past the first few episodes of the show because they couldn't stand Yuma's character. I made it further than that, but I will freely admit that I still haven't watched the entirety of Yu-Gi-Oh! ZeXal. I know roughly what happens because I read some synopses and whatnot in preparation for this review. And I am, technically speaking, part of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fandom, so I've picked up on some things over time. But the show did lose me. There was a period in, I don't even know what season because I didn't really keep track, during a tournament arc where I just kind of lost interest in what was happening. The duels were kind of reminding me of some of the moderate to worse duels from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and it just didn't hold my attention. But I powered through, and I thought I was going to make it, but then Yuma turned into a Super Saiyan. Not literally, obviously, but eventually, during a very serious duel, the bond between Yuma and Astral manifests itself, and just like you would overlay two monsters on top of each other to summon an Xyz monster, Yuma and Astral overlay upon each other and become a sort of merged being that looks like a Super Saiyan in silly futuristic armor. And that's honestly where it lost me. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but it just came out of nowhere. I honestly don't know what was wrong with the character dynamic as it already existed. We've seen in previous Yu-Gi-Oh! Series and in subsequent Yu-Gi-Oh! Series that the bonds between people do allow amazing things to happen in this universe. So why couldn't the strengthening bond between Yuma and Astral be what gives them their power? It was called like Shining Draw or whatever. Basically, they could pull whatever card they wanted from their deck once per game. And to do something as simple as that, they literally merge bodies and become a version of Yuma whose hair is different and who is wearing different clothes. Where did those clothes come from? How is his hair suddenly different? You could say magic, but this series didn't really have a magic vibe. It had more of a technology vibe. So I tend to think that because magic isn't a valid reason here, it was just a little too much. It took it in a different direction than I expected it to go. From what I understand, the show actually rounds out to be pretty good by the end, so I do intend to go and finish it up at some point. Like, I guess the final arc, a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh fans who actually stuck with the series claim is really good. And I do know enough about the later parts of the series to know that I would actually probably really like Yuma during that arc. That by that point, the most annoying aspects of his character will have subsided. And at the end of the day, I'd rather go back and watch the original series, or certain arcs from GX, or the Dark Signers arc from 5Ds, or pretty much anything from the most recent series. Then I would go back and rewatch the tournament arc from ZeXal, for example. It's almost as if ZeXal is the beige of the franchise. By trying to take existing elements of the franchise and do something new with them, they ended up finding a middle ground between a bunch of the things that fans really like about the franchise and just kind of staying within that middle ground. It's not as uneven as GX, I guess, but at the end of the day, I like GX better. I don't know, any Yu-Gi-Oh fans watching this video, tell me, what did you think of this series? Do you agree with what I said? Do you think that this is the best Yu-Gi-Oh series and you have proof to back up your claim? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And there's a reason that I chose to focus so much on the fact that this series felt like it was trying to take what was great about Yu-Gi-Oh and do something new with it, but that it kind of failed at that in a lot of ways, because the next series and the final series that I'm going to be talking about as part of this mini-series of reviews, Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, did the same thing, but did it so much better. Whereas ZeXal was beige and plain and kind of formulaic, following the same pattern set forth by the original series, but just covering it in a coat of paint. Arc 5 actually took some of the best elements of the entire franchise and did something almost entirely new with it, while still keeping it similar enough to be a real nostalgia trip. So stay tuned for my review of that Christmas Day, when the "Oh, there's no place like home for the Yugi-Days" mini-series event comes to an end. Until then, guys, remember, the fun is just beginning.